Hey everybody, it's Romania Black, and we're on volume 30 of Yona of the Dawn. Man, last volume was all Hawk-centered, and the volume before that was pretty Yona-centered, and now the cover of volume 30 is the two of them together with Yona in Hawk's arms as he kisses her forehead. So I'm pretty excited about this volume, to say the least. So yeah, volume 29 is out on Patreon, volume 28 is out on YouTube, and I'm really excited to get to this. I've realized two things. I talked about in last volume that Hawk reminded me a lot of Aragorn from Lord of the Rings when he had like the charge and everything, which makes Yona kind of like Arwen, and she's kind of, Arwen's, you know, an elf, and so in Lord of the Rings she's kind of have a supernatural vibe to her. Yona does too. But I also realized the whole thing with Ying Kuelbo, it reminds me a lot of, if you've ever watched Sailor Moon, he reminds me of Diamond. Prince Diamond. Sailor Moon is such a big part of my childhood. And I remember that there was an arc where Sailor Moon gets kidnapped by the gemstones and Prince Diamond kidnaps her. And he has a very Kuelbo vibe where he's kind of like creepy and kind of like harassing her just a bit. And she's like, get out of my space. And he's like, no. And then she's like, I just want Damien, aka Tuxedo Mask, to come save me. And then Hawk is kind of like our Tuxedo Mask. So when we left off, Hawk is being noticed by Kuelbo. He's like, I think Kuelbo suspects that he might be the Thunder Beast that Jeha warned Kuelbo about. And so of course he's going to want to try to capture him. Yona's still being held hostage. Jeha is having to fight the dragons to try to get them to go back to the Kai Empire, even though he's just doing it to help Yona, but he doesn't really want to do it, and it's just angst. And then everything, because of Suwon's planning and Hawk's execution, is the tides have turned for Quokka to be there and be able to fight the Kai Empire and not lose to them. So looking at this volume cover, though, I see that little lapis lazuli hanging there right in front of, between him and Yona, and I'm like, this volume is probably going to devastate me. So I do ask, though. I do ask. I don't know if I've said this in the spoilers for the community guidelines specifically, but I don't want people to hype me up on certain volumes because I want to go in with as little expectations as possible. Obviously, I know that every volume I'm going to love because I love this series, but I have had some people in the past be like, oh, wait till you get to volume this, or chapter something something is my favorite. I don't want to know that because that will get me hyped up for a chapter, or it could give me some expectations that may or may not be met, and I want to be surprised as I read. So I've had a few come out in the last few weeks, and so maybe if you've not read that community post, it's on YouTube. There's a post on Patreon about it, about spoilers, but just please don't tell me that. Let me soak in the reaction, and then after you watch this video, you can be like, oh yeah, this was my favorite volume, and I'm like, okay, cool, that will be fine. Totally great. Or you can be like, this chapter in this volume was my favorite, and I'm like, that'll work. But yeah, supposedly Kusanagi said in the last volume that this was going to be the end of the arc. How? We have so much to wrap up. How? I have a feeling Jeha has a plan. That Jeha has a plan to get the dragons to do something, but unless he brings them all there to get them to help. But how is it going to end in 200 pages, Kusanagi? What are you doing? So, or is this arc going to lead into a new arc that's connected to it? I could see that, but I don't know. But let's find out, shall we? We're not wasting any more time. So yeah, I've been waiting all weekend to read this arc, and I'm pretty excited. So we're going to read Yona of the Dawn, volume 30, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. That was the shortest volume of anything. What in the world? Oh, Kusanagi! 10 years, baby. 10 years, and she's like, it's time. It's time. It's been a slow burn long enough. They're gonna make out, and it's gonna be so freaking good. Oh, at the end of that, I hit my hand on the desk, and it like knocked my camera out, and that's why that video suddenly stopped. But I was like, oh my god. Oh, this volume. I'm amazed. I really am. I was wondering how in the world are we resolving it this quickly? But honestly, Rihazara, so interesting, fascinating. We're going to talk about this. I'm fine with it. For the first and foremost, I can see when we get to the chapter, I could see where people would be like, oh, that was resolved way too quickly. I'm okay with it for a number of reasons. Chapter 175 is one of them. And chapter 174, oh my god, is one of them. But I'm okay with it. And when we get to that point, we'll talk about it. But man, Zeno just smirking over here like the young lad and the young fellow and the young lady. Oh my god, this volume. Oh, this is one of my favorites. I freaking love this volume, but Hawk is gonna need like some serious first aid, like after this. Like he is about to die. Like, God, Hawk. What the hell? And Yona too. They're gonna need to, Hawk and Yona need to just sit side by side in a tent and heal up with Yoon helping and then talk things out. That's what needs to happen. Hawk and Yona need to sit side by side in a tent by themselves, talk about their feelings, and figure some things out now, because that'd be great. You really need to, because now they both said it to each other. They both said I love you to each other. And the thing of it is that he said it to her when she couldn't quite hear him, and now he's heard her say it when she didn't know what she was saying herself. So yeah. Oh my God, they both love each other. It's a thing. Oh, I'm so glad I didn't look at the chapter titles, because they're so spoilery. I called out to you in my dreams countless times. Oh my God. Chapter 175. Oh my God. Ah. So Kuelbo is probably like the biggest surprise out of this volume. He is kind of like, he's like Hawk. I said in the last volume that he reminds me a lot of Hawk, like the dark version of Hawk. But the thing that Kusanagi does with his character is really good. Like at the end of the day, Kuelbo, he's flirty with Yona and it's creepy in the last volume. But when you find out now he didn't try to do anything with her, he was just keeping her from escaping. And then of course there's the whole second wife thing, but we'll get to that. But the thing that's interesting about him that Kusanagi does is that even though he's an antagonist, by the end of this story, by the end of this arc, him and Hawk are fighting side by side to save the women that they love. And it's like, only Kusanagi, I think, can get away with that. It'd be like, oh yeah, because at that point, Hawk's like, I don't care, I just want to get to Yona, and he just wants to get to Yuran. So, God, like, his character, I really wasn't expecting. Gobi's still the worst. Gobi is the worst, and I really was hoping Hawk would just get rid of him, but Algira and Voldo had clearly been told that they needed to bring him back. The flirting between Kija and Jaeha continues. Like, Jaeha and Kija, I think Jaeha flirting more with Kija than Kija that was Jaeha, but just that flirting, I reread volume 29 before reading this tonight, and just the whole thing where Jaeha was like, he's stronger than me. I was like, stop it, Kusanagi, you just make them so good. And Sheena's getting a sense of humor. Oh no! But yeah, but Zeno being like, look, you need to draw your sword and you need to attack me. And Sheena's like, I don't want to. I love that Sheena has all this power and has like of all the dragons we've seen so far, like seen them manifested, the blue dragon has been the most malicious, the blue dragon seems the most like angry, which is funny because Sheena is not at all. Sheena, like, who's the vessel for him, is not malicious at all. He's this damn cinnamon bun. And so it's curious that the darkest of the dragons, with the exception of Hawk, which we'll talk about, is the one housing him. So that's really, really interesting. But Zeno is trying to be like, look, Zeno's like, y'all can hurt me, it's gonna be fine. But I love the dragons don't want to, because they're like, no, everybody hurts you, Zeno, and it's not cool that you get hurt. And Zeno just kind of looks at him like, are you listening? And he's like, I said I don't want to. He's like, I don't want to hurt you. I love that Zeno, like, is used to people abusing him and hurting him, and these dragons are like, no, we're not going to do that. And Zeno's just like, okay, young fellows, blue dragon. But so Yuran, I love her design on the last page where she has the dark hair. It's cool. But yeah, so I love that we have these parallels of Yuran and Yona and how they both love the two men that they consider like their king, which Hawk is not her king, but still, I like that Yuran loves Kuelbo and just as much as Yona loves Hawk, and they both have faith in them. They're going to come back. And yeah, what I liked about Yuran's character in this is that at first you could see how maybe she would be jealous of Yona, right? That she would be jealous of her, that she's like, oh, it's my job to take after you. You're also going to be wife to my husband. And Yona's like, oh God, no. Yona's like, nope. No, I think you've got the wrong idea. But she's like, but she does everything that Kuelbo tells her to, which is also, if you notice, Kuelbo, he has like his robes and stuff on. So I'm like, did she have to like turn around so that he could undress? Ugh. But she's like, Yona's like, no, I don't love him, but I can tell that you do. She's like, but I'm going to die before becoming his second wife because he's hurt my friends and taken them hostage. And she's like, I'm not cool with that. But what I like about her character is that she's not unreasonable. She's not like the jealous stereotype character that's like tries to kill Yona out of jealousy or shade. No, she doesn't like it. She doesn't like the situation, but she also loves Kuelbo, and so if he says to do something, she respects that decision. Also, in hindsight, I'm like, he was going to make Yona the goddess of war, but that means bringing her to the front line. So kind of her becoming a wife was sort of like maybe par for the course because she wasn't his sister. So I feel like her, I don't know, I feel like her going to the front lines would have put Yona in danger. And he obviously wasn't going to make Yuran the goddess of war because he didn't want to put her in danger like that too. So there's like an ulterior motive. He does love Yuran, we find out. And he goes back to get her. So it's great. And we'll touch base on that. But yeah, Gobi is the worst. Gobi is absolutely the worst. I hate him. He's such a zealot. And he's so driven by this obsession with the dragons and wanting to see this like miraculous divine power that it makes him do the worst things. And I'm like, why? And so, yeah, then we have this battle between Hawk and Kuelbo, which is the most ridiculous battle. I absolutely love it. What I love about this battle is that it could easily be these two macho guys that are like, she's my lady. No, she's my lady. But Hawk, the husbando of our decade, of Yona of the Dawn, is not like that. No. I love Taejun's like, oh no, he can't hear me. He's like, I can hear you. And he's like, is Yona your woman? And I love that Hawk is like, did someone say something so stupid that just hearing it wakes me up, you piece of crap? And Kishuk's like, no, he can hear. I also love Kishuk in this. Kishuk, whenever Taejun is like, King Kuelbo, did you kidnap Princess Yona and the green and yellow dragon? And Kishuk's like, don't forget about Yoon. I love Kishuk is just there to keep it all 100. But Hawk's murderous expression in all of this, oh my God. He's just like, he is absolutely out for blood. He's like, I'm taking that girl for myself. And he's like, no, who are you taking? And I love these like, you just said she wasn't your woman. And he's like, don't talk to her like she's an object. I'm like, Hawk, my husbando of all ages. That whole phrase, like, I know some people that are my parents' age and they'll say, there's my woman. And I'm like, ugh, it's just creepy. I'm like, no, not an object. Thank you. But yeah, where are my friends and her highness? And he's like, her highness? He's like, she told me I couldn't call you that. Why? And I love the Hawk's like, how the hell would I know? One of my favorite things that Kuelbo says in this, he's like, okay, clearly Yona is in love with Hawk, but he might be something of an idiot. Yes, Hawk just doesn't get it. It's like Hawk's so fixated on this unrequited love. I'm like, dude, you cannot read the room. She loves you. At least he knows now. God. But yeah, and so I like that Kuelbo and Hawk are pretty much evenly matched, but Hawk is a demon. He is a beast. He is not human. There's something up with Hawk. I am fairly sure. There's no way a man should be this strong. No. He's not a dragon, but like, he cut his sword in half. He kept going through all this pain and stuff to get to her. If he is the sword, I'm like, if Yona is the king and he is the sword, and maybe Suwon is the shield, I don't know. But if he's the sword, which the sword and shield thing, if it was Suwon and Hawk, that would fit really well together because they kind of have like a soulmate vibe. The sword and the shield's always together, you know, but they're both protecting the king, which is the queen in this case. There's that. Or you could look at Suwon as the king and Hawk and Yona are the sword and shield, and they're still soulmates in that regard. So it works either way, but Hawk just keeping on going and just looking like a straight up demon. Like Hawk looks like the dark dragon. Like there's a moment where his eyes, like you can't see his mouth, you just see like his eyes. Oh my God. He's like, for a moment, I saw myself being gutted, and the instant I drop my guard, I'll be devoured. Oh, like just that Hawk being freaking scary. Oh my gosh. What? And so he's like, you're not getting away. Like Hawk, just like his face getting darker and darker and covered in blood. And I love that Kuelbo comments on how Yona was like, none of my people are concerned about me. And he's like, you're a big liar. They all are concerned about you. They all love you. He's like, no. And just Hawk attacking Kuelbo with that glaive. God. and just having that look on his face. Oh, him and Jaeha have similar looks whenever they're like confident about something or sly. Oh, it's great. So they figure out that they're back to square one, and Hawk's just like, a little farther and I'll reach them. And so they're like, what do we do? And then I love that Sheena saved up his power to use it on the guards to knock them out so that Yoon could escape. And he's like, run, Yoon. And I love that he yells. He's like, Yoon, run. And then I love that they guard him. They're like, no. They're like, we'll go with you if you let Yoon go. Because that's genius writing on Kusanagi's part. Because it's like, yeah, let Yoon go back to help heal up Hawk so they can make it to the city to go get her. And then swap them out and have them go back to the castle. It makes sense. I was like, nope, that's great writing. I like that a lot. And they're like, Hawk. And then the hug where Kija's like, Hawk's fighting all on his own. He's like, you have to. You've got to take care of his injuries. And they all give him a big hug. I was like, oh my God, that was this volume was so emotional. I was like, oh my gosh. And so I like that, again, I like that Zeno and Sheena are together. That they're like, Jaeha, you're too cautious. Blue Dragon, you're too stubborn. I like that Sheena's talking more and more in this. I'm like, I'm all for Sheena having a voice. Yes. And then Hawk's confused. He doesn't know who to trust. And Yoon shows up. And I love that Yoon tells him about her kicking Gobi. And he's like, she kicked him? And he like gets so excited. And then, he's like, you'll see Yona again too. Like, everybody's rooting for Hawk and Yona. Yoon is like, you'll get to see her soon, buddy. Like, everybody's rooting for them. It's so wonderful. And so Gobi's just the worst. He tries to pit Yuran against Yona and saying that she'll be discarded. And he does it so that he can try to take Yona away with him. Because he's like, well, if I take Yona, the dragons will come. And then that'll be my way of getting a hold of them. And Yuran is like, no, I love that she just splashes the stuff in his face. And she's like, no, I guess your god isn't capable of seeing that. God, she gets some good lines too. But then, of course, his mercenaries come in, which I hate them. And there is this obsession. There's this weird kind of obsession with the dragons and Carnage. Because he just like, Mazari was talking about, I want to see those dragons again. If I have to carve you up, I will. So just like Mazari was wanting to do Zeno and hurt him, Gobi wants to hurt Yona so that the dragons will appear. And it's like, what the hell? Why? And then even Ao gets in on this and like attacks his face. I'm like, yes, please. She does the spice in their eyes. But I love that Yona, even with the shackles on, she's able to drop kick a guy. And then she realizes, when she says, I wish I had the power of 1,000 soldiers. But then she realizes that she's like, it's not as if I can't fight. She has the same strength. She gets that strength from Hawk. And I'm like, oh my God, girl. My hands hold strength given to me by the strongest person of all. It's so good. I'm like, oh my God. And the two of them side back to back. Oh, this volume sending me. And she like fires arrows. Our girl Yona just being a badass. So Kuelbo goes back. Voldo and Algira, who Hawk's in the head, they run into Jaeha and them, which is great. And then they figure out, Jaeha gets a plan. He's like, okay. He's like, Voldo and Algira can go and find Yona. We can make that work. Meanwhile, I can take the knowledge that Yona's given me about Rihazara and put it into practice. He's like, we can get this going. I'm honestly okay with this because I feel like, I know at this point that a lot of people might complain that Kusanagi was trying to speed up this arc and having it end abruptly. Because it was only like two or three volumes. It was a pretty short arc in comparison to some of the other ones that we've had. But in defense, I would say that I'm glad it wasn't drug out. One, because at this point, this is probably like the heaviest casualties we face. Like, Hawk's about to die. We can't carry out Hawk's battle any further. He is literally about to die. That's not going to work. The dragons are at their limits. That's not going to work. If Suwon and them get involved, it's just going to be a big massacre. And then the thematic elements of the story, which is about Yona, getting the people involved and united, that's all going to fall apart too. So from a writing standpoint, your characters are at their limits. And so you have Algira and Voldo who are fine. They can go help get Yona. And then Hawk is there too. But what I like about this part of the volume is that it gives it's a payoff to what Yona told Jeha. He gets to pay that off. It reveals something about Rihazara, which we're going to talk about. It reveals something about King Kuelbo, which we're going to talk about. And it allows Hawk and Yona to have those moments. And that's wonderful. So, and plus it gets to line. It brings about some things with Judo too, because we're going to talk about Judo as well. So Rihazara is a lot different than I imagined. He seemed so menacing when we first were introduced to him, but he actually is kind of a coward. It's not so much that he's a coward too, it's that he cares about his men, and he sees the writing on the wall that the longer this battle goes on, the more his men are going to be at stake. Also, seeing Voldo without the mask is super weird. He looks a lot like Hawk. A lot. Not quite like Hawk. He's not as handsome as Hawk, but Kusanagi makes a difference. But I like that Rihazara, it's not so much that he's a coward, but also that he's worried about his men, and he realizes that Kuelbo is going to sacrifice him and his men first before the Thule tribe. So they're not really brothers. They're like from separate tribes, it seems, which is good. I love that Sheena is just perched on Zeno's shoulder. It's the cutest thing. And so Jeha uses Suwon quite interestingly here. He uses the threat of Suwon. Even though they're not working for Suwon, Rihazara doesn't know that. And so he's like, and Rihazara, he just gives up the ghost. He's like, oh no, it wasn't me. It was Kuelbo that planned all of this. And Jeha's like, and I love that they plan, like they make it all like, you can hear the horses. He's like, oh, that's Suwon. He's coming. Even though he's not there, they're like, I'll help you out I'll protect your city if you're willing to surrender. And so Kuelbo, he's all ready to go. He's like, well, we've got the dragons. We can just fight them. We'll be fine. And I like the dragons were like, did they expect us to just fight? That's the thing. Kuelbo and Gobi, they both assume that the dragons they're just weapons. They can just get up and go and be ready to go and fight anytime they want. But that's not the case. Yona's like, no, they're weakened. They need to rest. They're humans. They need to rest to even use this power. So that's not going to work. Oh God, it's so good. But yeah, I love Jeha being like, excuse me, we're surrendering. And he's like, Rihazara surrendered because they don't want us to invade the Sin province. It's like, we're here for Yona and then we're going to leave. We're going to take Kuelbo and we're going to go. And so Judo is like, the fire tribe stopped as soon as they heard her name. So Judo is realizing the same things that Kishuk has realized. And that is that you have the fire tribe are all on board Yona and Hawk train now. They're all on board the dragons, Yona and Hawk. Hawk is their captain of them. He's a war hero. He saved their people. He led them in the battle. Like Hawk has done no wrong. And Judo is afraid that now that Suwon has spent all this time uniting the 5 kingdoms, now this one kingdom, the fire tribe, is starting to drift towards Yona and Hawk and sympathizing with them. We already know that Riri and the water tribe are drifting over there. So everybody's becoming divided all over again. It's bringing things back to square one. And Judo's like, we killed the king and took over to make our kingdom stronger. And now it's getting divided. So Judo has reason to fear Hawk for reasons, but now also because he's become a hero and is just going to divide everybody further. So that's interesting. So that's going to be something going into the story, right? I'm so curious. But then, yeah, everybody's all cheering for Hawk, and he's like, droopy eyes. I love Jeha and Hawk's banter, where he's like, Yona told me the Sin province isn't united. She's the one that gave me the advice. And Hawk's like, nothing ever keeps her highness down. Oh, just like, and then they're like, we'll end the battle by getting her back and going. And so, yeah, Judo is like, the Thunder Beast is like the supreme commander of this battle. And then I like that Judo says, well, it's good that Suwon wasn't here because it would have only made matters worse. But if people become more aware of them, Kwoko will be divided. So yeah, we're going to go back to square one. Interesting. So they all go in, and then I love Hawk's optimism. He's like, compared to Psycha Palace, she's in arm's reach. We can find her. I'm like, oh my God. Meanwhile, Kuelbo has been given the order to retreat. And so they're like, we have to get you out of here because you are the blood of our tribe. But Kuelbo is trying to go back when he's like, I need to go back to the palace. You think that he's going back for Yona and Yuran, but he's really just going back for Yuran. He's like, he sees the writing on the wall that Yona's getting away. He wants to go back and get his wife. And I'm like, that's so good. But you don't exactly realize that at first. And so the dragon warriors are fighting, and Hawk, he's like, we came to get our people back. And Hawk's just like killing people left and right. And I love that back-to-back where Jaeha and him like swoop around. He's like, you see what happens when you use a girl's safety as leverage. I'm like, And even Jaeha's like, whoa, Hawk, you're at your limit. And he's like, no, I'm not the only one. Let's go. He's like, everybody's at their limits. I'm just doing what I can. God, I love it. I love it. I love it. And so then, yeah, Yona, she senses a girl, that shackles on her legs, like her ankles are bleeding. And I was afraid when Yuran suggests putting her in the box, I was afraid Yona was going to stay there and like would get overlooked. I thought it was going to become a thing. And I was like, she's going to get overlooked. Some guy's going to grab her. It's going to be this big old thing. Thank God Kusanagi was like, oh, hell no, we ain't doing that. And she realizes, she's like, she's so painfully trusting of Kuelbo. Yuran has loyalty to Kuelbo, much like Hawk has loyalty to Yona, which is funny because Kuelbo is the king and Yona is the would-be queen, and Yuran is the queen herself, and Hawk could be king. So it's funny you have those parallels, but I love that Yuran was not going to give up Yona, even after everything. And Yona saved her by firing the arrow. God, she's like, I haven't forgiven Kuelbo for anything, but I want you to live and be reunited with him. Because she senses, she's like, you love him and you deserve to be with him, just like I want to be with Hawk. So I love that Yona's like, she's so kind. She's like, I want to protect you because I know what your feelings are for Kuelbo and I want you guys to be together again. And so meanwhile, Hawk notices that there is the one guy with the armor and stuff, and he's like, you don't seem much like a Sky Tribe soldier, Kuelbo. And I'm like, it's great. It's great. I realize I'm going to have to go back and read the mangaka's notes, but I'm going to do that here in a minute. But, I like the alternate universe of like the older versions of Jaeha and Hawk. Only Hawk's 15, Jaeha's 22 because they're 7 years apart. I'm like, oh my gosh. Jaeha looks like, I don't know, Shigure and every like author figure in an anime. It's great. Would Jaeha be an author? I don't know. But yeah, he's like, oh, king, why'd you go in there? And I love that they still fight, but then Kuelbo kind of gives up. And he's like, look, we're both at our limits, and I'm going back. He's like, I was going to make Yona my tribe's goddess, but he's like, it's not important. He's like, tell me where her highness is. He's like, and then when he's like, Yona's in my chambers, when he says that I let her sleep in my bed and Hawk's like, gonna kill him, he's like, okay, we didn't sleep together, just beside each other. I love that Hawk's like, he's like, well, Hawk will probably kill me if I tell him that we slept together. I entrusted her to the woman I trust more than anyone in the world. He loves Yuran. I love it. And so just the idea of them fighting together, I'm like, what is this? I'm like, what is this? Like these two men that were just like beating each other senseless, fighting for the sake of the women that they love. I'm like, Kusanagi, you sweet, beautiful diva, you angel. And the fact that he like hugs her, he's like, I came back for you. And he's like, we're evacuating. And she just like tears up. It's like, oh, I'm so happy for them. Because even though Kuelbo, I'm like, Gobi I hate. But Kuelbo, I'm like, okay, you've grown on me a little bit. You really like your wife. You care about her. You let Hawk go to Yona. I'll let it go. I was like, it's fine. And then Algira and Voldo like going to like save her. And then the fire spreading. And Algira like getting knocked off the balcony with the kunai in him. And then Voldo jumping up and killing the soldier that had Yona so she could run away. But the shackles. And so, God, Gobi just being like, summon the dragon warrior. He's like crawling around her like a creepy little golem. He's the worst. But she's like, no. And then Hawk, like, he runs away from Hawk. And then she's like, and Yona just being like, I should have told him I loved him before we left. She's like, now I'll die and I'll never get a chance to tell him how I felt. And then that's when she tells him. She's like, I love you. And Hawk's face. Oh my God. But chapter 175. Chapter 175. Oh my God. This volume goes by so quickly because just so much happens. It's a very action-oriented volume. So lots of things happen and there's not a lot of dialogue. It's just a lot of emotions. And Kusanagi's illustrations, like the look on Hawk's face when he sees that she's been shackled and he's like holding her arm and everything and checking her pulse. Like just the fact of how enraged he is that the person he loves has had to suffer like that. It's like, oh my God. Hawk, this chapter might as well be called Why Hawk Won the Husbando Bracket. Like, even before this came out. And she's like, I love you. And he's like, huh? Like, just the fact that Hawk's like, wait, what? What did you say? Did you say something, Yona? She's like, yes, she told you she loves you, damn it. And she inhaled, she's like, I can finally see you. And I'm like, and the fact that she's like nearly crying when she's like, I can finally see you. And she was so happy to see him. And his eyes like light up like a little boy's. And he hugs her. And he's like, And okay, this is why volume 31, I mean, it'll probably be a little while before I read it because I have things that I need to do. But he's like, there's so many things I wanted to tell you. I'm so glad you're alive. Like, we all need a Hawk equivalent in our lives. There's no other way. We all need it. And she's like, thank you so much, Your Highness. She's like, I should be saying that. And so I love that he breaks the shackles. And he's like, I should have killed Kuelbo. He put him on there. But she seems, and I'm glad at first when she's happy to see Kuelbo, he's like, why are you happy to see him? And she's like, no, he came back for his wife. And Hawk's like, his wife? It's like, you mean he had you two sleeping together with him at the same time? She's like, oh no, Yuran wasn't there. How'd you know about that? I love that they're like, wait, what, she wasn't there? And she's like, oh, it's fine. And I love that Al's like, wink, yep, they're gonna leave this conversation. And so Hawk is looking at her like, okay, she probably wasn't abused because she seems okay with this. So we're fine. And he's like, let's go get your feet looked at. And I love that Voldo and Algira are fine. They land in the flowers. It's great. But the kiss scene, y'all. The damn kiss scene. I'm back to it. That's where I'm at. She's like, he's got severe injuries and burns. And she's like, oh, don't die. And she doesn't want him to die. And she's like, well, my throat hurts and I need water. So he's probably the same way. And like her ankles are like bleeding and everything. She's like, oh, there's water. Good. And she says there's no ladle. And she okay, so in the moment I was joking, being like, oh, she could carry it over. But she tries to. You can see it when you go back and look at the panel. She tries to carry it and it just falls through her hands. And so she's like, well, damn it. Yona's like, I'll be practical. And he's like, princess, stick close. And she's like, her kissing him with the water, I was like, I was on cloud 9 at that. I was on cloud 9 at that. I was like, oh, you clever, Kusanagi, you clever shrew. You're going to have her, like, take the water and take it to him, and that's going to be the way that they kiss. But then, no, oh my God. Oh, his face. His face. He just, like, grabs her with abandon. Like, just, ugh. She's like, I don't have any more water. And he's like, your mouth's too small. That's why it's not enough. Oh my God. Just stop. It's over. I'm just like, I was like, I've waited 30 volumes for this. It's like Kusanagi was like, okay, it's been 10 years. It's been a literal decade you've been reading this series. Maybe we should have them make out. Maybe. I mean, to be fair, they're at near death, and they did just, like, fight a battle to get to each other. Why not? You know? Oh, my God. Hawk. Ugh. Oh, my God. Yep. And she's still coughing from the smoke. And so he, like, wants to get her out of there. Mm-hmm. It's like Hawk has like done all the supreme ordeals, and then I love that he sees Gobi. He's like, next time you pull anything, the blade goes through your neck. And then Jeha goes to get them, and they're going back home. Oh my God! This volume. Oh my God. Oh my gosh. I wanted to go back and look through. I didn't read any of the mangaka notes as I'm going through this because I was just like, well, we'll get back to them. But this volume was so good. It went by so quickly. Like I said, it's such an action oriented. There's just not a lot of dialogue. It's just, I feel like there weren't a lot of mangaka notes either. Now that I'm going back through it, there wasn't a lot of notes. So I kind of want to see what all she said about this, because I feel like she didn't say a lot. I'm like, Kusanagi, what we doing? What we doing, Kusanagi? So, are there any notes? I'm curious. I feel like there are, but I'm going through these chapters being like, where do they start? I'm so curious. Most of this does not have much commentary from her, which is surprising, because usually by this point we're already having a manga, a page from the mangaka, and it's not happening yet. I'm curious. So I want to tilt this up. No, that's the same. It's the same size. There's not a lot of manga notes. I'm going through this right now to see if I see anything. Like a author, there's an afterword, so maybe that's why. We'll go through this. There's an afterword. But yeah, God. So now it's out in the open. HAKxYONA, they've made out. They both admitted that they love each other. It's all there. I could not be more thrilled. I know that at this point there are only 36 volumes of the English text out yet, and there's 38 in Japan. So we have at least 6 more weeks of Yona until I'm caught up, which I'm sad about, but also maybe by that point, volume 37 will be out. Maybe by that point, but then I'm going to keep up with this manga regardless. I'm going to still keep reading it volume to volume. It just may be some time in between, which is sad. But there are no manga notes. That's why usually the mangaka, I'm like, oh, we'll just skip that for later. But no, they're not in this volume. This is the craziest thing. There's just literally no mangaka notes, which is, this may be the first time that's happened, and maybe that's what made me go faster through it. Okay, so there's one that says line creator stamps for Yona are on sale. That's the first one we've seen, and it's over halfway through the volume. There was an afterword that was like a page long, and I want to go back and read it, but I can't believe that 10 years of Yona, and that was 6-7 volumes ago. That's so wild. But yeah, so no volume notes. This is the first time reading this manga this has happened, so I'm kind of surprised. All right, so gonna get to the end here. Gonna get to the end. We're getting back to this, going through this and seeing her like confess. It's great. I'm so floored, y'all. I'm so glad y'all didn't spoil this, because this made my night. This made my night. I was like, oh yeah. This chapter, this volume was amazing. It's one of my favorites. It's the fastest read I've done, which is so bittersweet because it's so damn good. But So okay, let's read this afterword now that I've made it to the end. Okay. Thank you very much for reading. I wanted to draw Yuran's hair, but didn't have the opportunity, so I'm showing it here. I also wanted to give additional information on Kuelbo and the Tuli tribe. Kuelbo is 35 years old and 190 centimeters tall, about 6'3". He's actually taller than Hawk. Yuran is 25 years old. Even though Yona was a prisoner, Kuelbo only shackled her legs for her defiance, so he felt he was being a truthful man when he said he treated her respectfully. Though the status of women in the Tuli tribe improved after Kuelbo's older sister, Tishia, became the goddess of war, men still held most of the power. Because of his sister's influence, Kuelbo was never especially cruel towards women. Since the Tuli tribe nomadic days, it's been normal for the men to be the breadwinners to take several wives. I think Kuelbo treated Yona like his sister rather than a potential wife. He might have eventually married her for political reasons, though. He loved his sister and competed with her as the unifier of their tribe. Drawing the battles for the Sin Province arc was difficult, but fun. I wanted to spend a bit more time on them. There's just a little more in the next volume to wrap up this arc. I'd like to thank my assistants for helping me with my tight deadlines, my editor in the Hana to Yona Yume editor office for all the trouble I put them through, everyone who's involved with selling Yona merchandise, and my readers for sticking with me for this long. I hope to see you all in volume 31. Mizuho Kusanagi. And then it's finally volume 30. This series has been continuing for 10 years now. Thank you so much for everyone reading it. Yeah, so I got that vibe too, that Kuelbo and Yona were more like, it was more like a sisterly thing with her than anything else. That's the vibe that I got. But God, I loved this volume so much. It was great, and yeah. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts about it too, as we wrap it up next week. As we wrap it up, it'll be great. I'm pretty excited. So yeah, I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. But I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'm gonna go reread this volume now, and I'll be back next week with more Yona of the Dawn. Bye.